Further speakers? Reno Tirakatini.
Mr. Speaker, tangitu ki te moana, maunga haruru ki uta, mohaka te awa, ko Ngati Pahauwera te iwi. Ko au ke te tahi o ngā uri o Pahauwera. Mihi tonu atu kia koutou e aku whanaunga, ka mihi te aroha kia koutou. Mr. Speaker, it's a great pleasure and a very proud moment for me to stand and speak on the final passage of this Ngati Pahauwera Settlement Bill. Mr. Speaker, this bill is very deeply personal to me because I'm very proud of my Ngati Pahauwera whakapapa, and in fact there are many Ngati Pahauwera whanaunga, putano all the way through the Waiponamu. And I acknowledge my dear great-grandmother, or as we say in our southern dialect, tawa. Her name was Amelia Henrissy, and she was the daughter of Adolphus Henrissy and Ropine Hinemare. And it's a very, very big whānau, but she was a little one of that very big whānau, and all of my whanaungas are here today, that many of them connect up through those lines. And it is deeply personal, Mr. Speaker, because this bill records, and I do acknowledge Honourable Chris Finlayson for the work that he has put in and his officials into the settlement, because it's important that we acknowledge the history and the complete background to the grievances of our Ngati Pahauwera whanaunga. In regards to the attacks on Mohaka, my great-grandmother, Amelia, was a baby at the time, and her elder sisters swam across the Mohaka River to escape from the Crown attacks at Mohaka. And as one sister tired, they handed the little baby, their baby sister, over to another sister. And that young baby obviously grew into a fine young lady, Mohaka Pahauwera princess, and they moved down to Te Waiponamu to the Banks Peninsula, and their father, Adolphus Henrissy, was a very skilled boat builder, and so he took his talents down there to Akaroa, and was very famous down there with his boat building prowess. And she married into another very big ngaitahu whānau down there, my Paua Aprehama Tūpahu Solomon Score. And their two children, Rangi Solomon and my tawa Ruti Mate Solomon, basically had a huge whānau right across the Te Waiponamu. And so, and I'm a product of that. My auntie, my late father were products of that, and they were all brought up by our great-grandmother, and that's why there is such a very close and dear affinity and affiliation to our Ngati Pahauwera side. And I also like to acknowledge, and so growing up, Mr. Speaker, my late father was always made it very clear to us, telling us the stories and making sure that we'd go back. I was playing in the reo, and we'd link up with Te Reo o Hāmuera. We'd go through to Mohaka and had many a great whakamoemiti and hui on that marae. Many a wonderful 21st occasions and many ceremonial occasions in the hall. Wonderful hakaris, wonderful times. And I remember I was playing my cornet in the band, but we couldn't match Raymond Joe and the Blue Mooners when it came to letting the hair down in the evenings in that wonderful hexagonal hall, which is there in Mohaka, the wharekai. So yeah, very, very proud to be standing to speak on this bill. It does, there are many elements to these settlements, and it's not about, as I mentioned earlier this morning, it's not about the money, and it's not about just having words on paper. These are very deep acknowledgements, and it's all about establishing the permanence of Ngati Pahauwera to their place and their connection to the Mohaka River and their whenua. And so I'm delighted to be here to actually speak on the passage of this bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do want to acknowledge a couple of other people who I've had the pleasure of dealing with over the years and previous careers, and that one is Toro Waka, and I know Toro Waka has worked tirelessly on the Ngati Pahauwera claim for many, many years, and I took Toro over many years ago, or a few years ago too. We went overseas on seafood missions, overseas looking at new markets for our iwi fishing companies, and so I always, saw Toro's really entrepreneurial drive and his commitment to his mahi. And that later progressed when he was a member of the Te Hukai Moana, the Māori Fisheries Commission, under Shane Jones, who was the chair at the time. So I'm mihi to Toro, in particular, for all his work. I'm very proud that I was, and my sisters are registered as beneficiaries for Ngati Pahauwera, and we receive all the mail through the post, and I'm very delighted to receive those letters and all those updates. And I'd also like to acknowledge, Parekura mentioned, Bishop Moxham, mihi tonu atu kia koe, who is here today. And so, Mr. Speaker, there are many elements to this bill. I won't traverse the details because I know other speakers have actually gone through all the elements of it. But importantly to me is the acknowledgement and the apologies that are listed in the legislation from the Crown, and the acceptance of the apology from Ngati Pahauwera. I think that shows a wonderful gesture on behalf of Ngati Pahauwera that they accept that apology in their legislation. And then there are also the various other aspects, the cultural redress, the commercial elements, and one in particular is the mechanisms to provide for Ngati Pahauwera participation in the natural resources. And so I think this is a significant part of all the recent settlements that are coming through, particularly around the awa, the rivers, and with the management, co-management models, protocols, letters of introductions, representation on planning committees, roles in nominating people to tribunals and the like. So all of those are, as I mentioned earlier, very important in re-establishing and restoring and reclaiming Ngati Pahauwera's space to their river and to their lands. So I just like to conclude my speech by saying that I'm shortly, I apologise to Ngati Porou because I won't be here for the full duration of their bill, but I'll be shortly travelling down to Kaikoura, where I'll be this weekend. And while I'm down there, I will visit the Urupa where Amelia Henry is buried there in Oaroa. So I will call in on her and fill her in on all the great developments that are happening with all of her whanaunga up there in Ngati Pahauwera. So I commend this bill, Mr. Speaker. I'm mihi to all my whanaunga here in Ngati Pahauwera, and also all of my fellow members here in this House. Kia ora no tātou, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Ko Alfred Naro.
Me mō ki rana tātou kātatua tōra mātua